Quirigua, Seals Bar, San Fernando, Payless Hardware, Diego Martin Main Road, Dodge Roti, Pitti Valley, Mirage Westside Arima, Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police. Also at islandetickets.com. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1082. Queens Royal College, 3-car raffle.
Fan Zone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
WESN.
And as we start another week, a couple of things with regards to pre-existing stories I just want to touch on quick. Then we'll have a couple of stories, including some crime stories to get to. Then we'll get into the meat of the matter. Then we have a media ambassador from the TPS to speak about the 16 days of activism, which is potentially quite timely, all things considered. When I read the news this morning, that was my thought. I don't know what to say. It is what it is, I guess, in TNT. The question is, to what extent are we tolerable of what that is actually, as opposed to trying to do something as a society to return to where we should be, what we are supposed to be? Sean Michael Small, this is Talking Point at WESND Content Capital Television. With a difference, we do try our best, ladies and gentlemen, to bring unedited, uncompromised, uncensored commentary. You could disagree with it if you want, but we're not necessarily going to be beholden to corporate or political interests, for better or worse. I'll just say this. It's a level of objectivity that has value in and of itself. Now, one of the things I just wanted to get to that I found, and this is something that was in the works for like the last week, and it makes no sense to me. The reason why I say that is with everything that's going on with regards to what's happening in Southern Caribbean, apparently now the American administration is looking to designate the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization. Although it has yet to say that the Venezuelan president, Maduro, is in charge of the cartel, which I was under the impression, based on previous reports, that they were gearing up to do so. Regardless, my whole thought was, hold on, stop. Officially, you all haven't declared this as a terrorist organization. You haven't declared him as the leader of said organization. Then what is all of this? It makes no sense, because it seemed as though they were operating in that capacity for however much long since September. And now they're like taking their time to make these declarations. It's not quite as bad, but it's, you know, in the same category as shooting first and having no evidence to justify it. And then asking questions later if deemed necessary. But it's more like the rest of us asking questions. Procedurally, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand. I mean, I'll say this. I didn't want to think that this is purely political, and political not in the sense of the politics between the U.S. and Venezuela, but political in the sense of American domestic politics in the current period. I didn't want to go there. Some people did, some learned academics did. If it is, it will be one of the most pathetic motivations to do something at this level and at this scale, right? If it's because of domestic politics and you need to distract. But hey, look, and I still don't think it is, but the procedure of, well, we're gonna, I mean, I guess this is very much similar to what we see locally, right? We're gonna imply things, and then we're gonna do things based off the implications, but formally, we're not actually gonna designate anything yet. And I do wonder, because they do have anti-terrorism laws from since Bush Jr.'s tenure, which was utilized by President Obama. So it's not as though it was a one-time presidential thing and nobody else took it up. So they do have that, which could come into play. If this is supposed to be going after a terrorist organization, they've now declared it as a terrorist organization. Basically, the one legal justification I could think might possibly have a chance to maybe succeed if everything lines up correctly, all their ducks in a row, but not just that, they cross all their T's, they dot all their I's, they do everything perfectly. It seems as though they couldn't even do, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they had reasons for doing this, but it seems as though you should declare these terrorist organizations first and then treat the suspected arms of the organization as terrorists, as opposed to doing the physical violence and then bringing the declaration a couple months later. I don't know. It doesn't seem as justified as it could be, as thin as it is already. Why do anything that further risks it? I don't understand. I don't understand. Maybe that's ultimately my problem. I'm trying to use reason in a situation that at this point has no logic. So, meanwhile, a complaint was filed against Minister Roberts unlawfully disclosing confidential financial information belonging to 3 private citizens, right? The Integrity Commission has been asked to this investigation. I don't think it necessarily says who made the complaint, but one of the things about it that's interesting, the conduct of the minister falls, this is a quote from the letter, falls squarely within the core mischief that Section 28 was enacted to prevent, right? And I believe that is with regards to the unauthorized use of confidential information, not required for any official duty or the needs of justice. Now, that last part, I could see where people are going to want to debate that, but at the end of the day, what was the information used for? For formal proceedings or for someone's social media platform? And that's the thing. There is an interesting side debate, which is what I really wanted to get to, in the fact that for whatever reason, on top of the political benefits one would imagine Minister Roberts was trying to achieve. Now, you know, you could debate what the objective was. Was it to attack Ralph Gonsalves? Was it to distract from his own situation, etc., etc.? Did it have more to do with the whole U.S.-Venezuelan tensions and Trinidad's role in it? Did it have more to do with live sport? Did it have more to do with just he's pro-PNM, so we're anti-him, and we found a thing, and we just want to do it because we found a thing, right? We probably will never truly know because the public never truly gets 100% of the inner motivations of any sort of political action that has questions on it. But what we do know is a normal political commentator would not have the capacity on his own to go into a government agency, a state agency, or a government ministry and get confidential documents on his own, or have someone retrieve it for him officially, one would imagine, because if it was unofficially, then that's a whole next can of worms, right? And then use that on his social media platform. Now, part of the question you have to ask is, to what extent is a social media platform in TNT based on politics profitable enough? Because if this was the States or Europe, and you had a relatively big social media following up there, money will be part of the questions because money will generally be part of the equation. Here in TNT, it's not so clear-cut. I don't necessarily know exactly how, because I have yet to see like sponsorship on political commentary. A lot of political YouTubers have sponsors on top of ad revenue from YouTube, which is not always that great unless you have something like millions of subscribers and hundreds of thousands of millions of views. And generally speaking, it's not like we're going to have millions of subscribers. Our population is 1.4 million. And a lot of people are disengaged from politics. But that's the thing. Now, granted, most political commentary and activism are very much biased for a side in a way that's even more apparent than most of American social media or media. It's blatant, right? To the point where people view them not just as biased for the side, but operatives for the side. Now, in the case of Anna Roberts, Minister Roberts, apologies, obviously he is an operative for his side. He is a sitting minister. But that's an interesting thing. I don't know if we've reached the point where we have to seriously have conversations on social media platforms of politicians and their access to information, and what that could mean for content on their platforms, what that could mean for their financial benefit of their social media. Right? It's one of those things where at some point we're probably going to have that conversation. It doesn't have to necessarily be now. I don't know if the figures really matter locally, at least not yet. One of the side effects of if we get more people involved in politics, which is when I say involved, I don't mean actually parts of the political process directly, but rather part of the democratic process as citizens. If we get more people engaged with the democratic process, then there will technically be more money in political commentary, particularly in social media. And perhaps one day we'll get there, and then we'll have to deal with that problem if we do. But that's a much better problem to have than people just being disengaged. But it is what it is. Now, another thing I want to talk about quick, the central bank governor is talking about renewable energy key to Trinidad and Tobago sustainability. Yes and no. It all depends in what sense. Because economically speaking, unless we become a major manufacturer of these things in this part of the world, it's not going to be an economic factor for sustainability. Or let me rephrase that. It's not going to be a factor in our economic sustainability. It might be, it's always going to be a factor in our energy sustainability. But then, of course, the question is which renewables? That's one of the things that I think people kind of need to understand. Energy companies are going to renewables and are going to that transition because, I mean, they have to. Kodak should have gone digital, right? Blockbuster should have gone digital, did not. And as technology progresses, you're always going to have this thing. People who sold horses had to transition to selling cars, right? Rail travel had to transition, rail travel had to transition to the fact that the industry moved towards air travel. So now rail travel is somewhat more of a niche, whereas when it was the latest and greatest, it was the only game in town. So for us in TNT, what we get out of renewable energy sources might not be the same as the energy companies, right? We have no competitive advantage for renewable manufacturing. We have a competitive advantage in oil. It's called having it. We have a competitive advantage in natural gas. It's called having it. You naturally have an advantage over countries that don't have it. Just look at the rest of the Caribbean. But that does not translate to a future of having advantages in renewable energy, whether manufacturing, maintenance, what have you. So it's an interesting comment, and it's just, I don't necessarily know fully what was the limitations of what the governor meant or did not mean, right? Because he went on and his further comments does not clarify the point or the distinction that I'm trying to make. But ultimately, the point that I'm trying to make is we need to stop looking at things as though it's like, oh, well, we go from apples to apples 2.0. The world is more complex than that. So, and that doesn't mean we don't do it, but rather how we view it and approach it matters. Now, one of the things I do find interesting, the CPO apparently has offered 10%. I don't know why it took so long. I don't know what was all the song and dance about potentially wanting to educate the PSA on the economic realities of the country if you were just going to give them 10%. It makes me think that the 10% was not guaranteed, and perhaps it was a situation where we need to save face, offer them 10%. The unions was agitated and complained, and now we see what we see. So they still have hope for getting back pay in time for Christmas, but I think that has not necessarily been fully fleshed out. They have the reports are saying that they have the offer on the table, right? So I'm not entirely sure exactly if they have a 10% offer on the table, what is left to be negotiated, right? The 10% covers the two negotiation periods of 2014 to 16 and 17 to 19, which I believe was what was hoped for, right? So one thing I'll say about this, Dr. Sajuan, who we had on the show last week, she had some interesting things to say about the wage increase, right? And this is the quote, and it's pros and cons. So now it's, to some extent, it's left up to you to have your final judgment. But listen to her opinion. On one hand, the government making such a sizable commitment raises questions about where the money will come from and whether it increases indebtedness. Because if you're going to use loan financing for what would be recurring expenditure, a wage increase means, well, you have to pay off the back pay and then pay off the future pay too. On the other hand, the economy is at a standstill and needs an injection of economic activity. Pumping this kind of money into the system fuels expenditure and triggers a multiplier effect. That is very true. The question is, how will our foreign exchange and supply of goods, the supply side, deal with what will potentially be an increase in demand when more money goes out there? Now, given the fact that we're potentially seeing an economic slowdown, in theory, there might be enough on the supply side to absorb this extra liquidity. It kind of then depends on what are the specific needs of the people holding this money, and will they be met, or will we have supply unutilized because it's goods and services that the people who have the spare liquidity, they don't want it, and then demand for things that we can't necessarily get enough of. So it's not all straightforward, but it's a good basic point that economically speaking, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It depends on a lot of moving parts and details and so forth and so on, right? I just find, again, this is one of the things where the timing of the situation is very, very interesting, right? Why did you have to go through all of that song and dance? Just set up, why did you have to stall out the meeting? Because it seemed as though they were stalling the PSA. This is in part based on what the PSA said. Why go through all of this if you're going to end up with the 10% anyway? And it just speaks to the fact that Dave Tanku did say it's not necessarily going to be 10%. It could be 5%, it could be 0%, which meant the final decision definitely was not made yet, and it was up in the air up until, I guess, recently. That's the implication of what was said by the parties involved, right? Unless someone has a different interpretation. But if you want to call in later and give that interpretation, don't just say, I view it differently. Give us a line of reasoning to explain why it would be different, given what the minister said, given what the head of the PSA said, given the timeline and the fact that the CPO was, yes, I understand that he was away, but the PSA was complaining, you're not even responding to me. You know, this is not a small thing given the political promises made. Political promises which up until recently were not yet kept. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'll get into a story that I should have touched on last week. A caller did. I didn't. I regretted that. And then lo and behold, the story blew up. I don't want to make it seem as though It's only because of that I want to comment on this. It's something that is more important than we probably think it is, particularly if we want to move forward. I'll explain when we come back after this.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College.
Merry Christmas.
First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded big ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also nationwide at Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road, Shamir, Uncle Beto, Santa Cruz, Better Deal Supermarket, Cunupia, and Aranguez, Khan's Liquor, Diego Martin Main Road, Ramsing Sports, Chaguanas and Cooper, Bobby's Barbecue Wrap, Mirage Supermarket, Sangre Grande, West B Supermarket, Diego Martin and Tacarigua, Sion's Bar, San Fernando, Payless Hardware, Diego Martin Main Road, Don's Roti, Pitti Valley, Mirage Westside Arima, Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police. Also at ICNTT.com. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1082. Queens Royal College, 3-car raffle.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
My name is Dr. Joanne Williams-Carroll, and I am the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health at the Community Hospital. At the Community Hospital, we believe in nurturing mind, body, and soul. Through our counseling and chaplaincy program, we will provide you with support and strength you need to help with your mental and emotional well-being. Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
One of the things that did get my attention that I intended to speak on, but it's one of those things when putting the show together, and for whatever reason, I just forgot about the story, and a caller brought it up last week, was with regards to the threats posted on social media against the Prime Minister on Facebook. And essentially it was the case of local residents here telling, I believe it was Venezuela, to attack the Prime Minister. And I understand, look, I've been saying it for weeks now specifically, right? Laissez-faire society, where in our everyday lives we might throw stuff like that out there, right? Particularly as jokes, particularly amongst our friends. And then we kind of take it for granted. Oh, well, it's just a thing, it's not serious. The thing is, when a state of emergency and we have airstrikes or drone strikes happening, you know, if not in our waters, then in international waters right next to us. And we have tensions in the region. Now is not the time to be making statements like that you don't mean. Because it doesn't matter who is in power, who the Prime Minister is. It doesn't matter if you like Prime Minister Kama Prasad Bisesa or not. These kinds of things, they just can't be tolerated. And the reason why they can't be tolerated is, at some point, no matter if 99.99999% of us interpret it as somebody just venting stupidly, but not necessarily meaning let's inflict violence. There's still always that very small minority, less than 1% of people who might hear it, think it's a good idea, and do something about it. And doing something about it might not mean attacking the Prime Minister, but it might mean doing something actually physically violent, crazy, with real world consequences, right? Part of it, I guess, is, look, back in the day, we didn't necessarily see things through this lens and understand things through such a lens. And perhaps you might say, oh, why are you being so scared? Why are you being so, cowardly? Scaredy cat. It's not that serious. Don't act like that. Don't get on so. Yeah, but back in the day, you actually had successful assassinations. You actually had lone wolf operators who just got in their head, hey, you know what, it'll be a good idea for me to shoot Lincoln, or shoot Reagan, or shoot Kennedy, or shoot whoever, or shoot a guy, shoot some nobleman from a foreign country in a European country, and kickstart technically 2 world wars, because 2 was literally a direct sequel of 1, not just a continuation of a series, but not connected. World War II came in part due to consequences from World War I, which started with a single political assassination. And then on top of that, there's the whole question of egging on a foreign power that clearly monitors our social media and our rumor mill and the national discourse with regards to our political figures, because they pull some stuff. They pull some stuff about the Prime Minister that was personal attacks that is not part of the proper news cycle. Forgive me, that's the best I could come up with in the moment. So now the situation is the lady apologized, which is fine. The question is now exactly how far will the law take it? Because here's the thing. There's a part of me that thinks you can't just let off the hook. It could happen again, and it could happen again in a way with actual consequences. But the flip side is, how far should you go? How severe should the punishment be, right? It's one of those things where we don't necessarily know because we're trying to prevent a what if, which means that nothing technically has happened yet. So how far should we go ethically? Regardless, I do think the rhetorical answer is as far as is necessary to send the correct message of let's not let this happen again. Not to scapegoat anybody, not to inflict punishment and oppress them, but can't allow this to happen again. Now, I say all that, and it would have been my intention to say that alone without all the stuff that's going to come after, except I read the news this morning and there's a part 2. I don't. And just by the way, there's also another situation. So technically it's more than a part 2. There's a part 2, part 3. A businessman who was arrested with regards to illegal quarrying, at least based on the reports, I believe that it was, now apparently is arrested because he was part of an organized crime group that was involved in illegal arms trafficking, money laundering, and illegal quarrying. So hence, I guess, the initial reports. But also due to being part of a plot to assassinate a government minister, him and his son. So we're in a situation, let's not forget, we're in a state of emergency. What is that state of emergency for? It was because allegedly there were threats against the lives of senior government officials. And while, yes, I am a skeptic with regards to certain things government says and certain things government does, but I'm a skeptic not because I disbelieve the UNC and I disbelieve the administration. I'm a skeptic when I have specific reasons and I'm presented with specific evidence to say, hey, this is not looking kosher. These specific things, question them. But with regards to the state of emergency, given the fact it's the law enforcement agencies who technically should be politically neutral, it's the president of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago who technically was appointed by the previous administration, I saw sufficient enough to say, hey, let's prevent a thing from happening. Yes, I get it. It'll be kind of difficult to prove if it never happens, but the thing is, we don't actually want it to happen. So now, someone has been arrested with specific accusations. Don't know if it'll hold up in court, don't know what the fallout or the consequences might be once the state of emergency ends, and this whole situation with these preventative detention orders comes to an end, right? Not sure how that's going to work, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I say that to say that these things are serious, these things matter. Senator Dr. Emery Brown apparently reported threats against him on Facebook. And I could see where it works both ways. One of the things that I have been concerned about is the level of our political language and the fact that given we are a lawless society with access to guns, and at least a small subset of the society is more than willing to inflict violence with the most heinous means, with the most callousness of execution. Again, the political language now. I'm surprised we don't see more threats against politicians on both sides, because they vilify each other, but in a way, the supporters are the ones that have some of the worst language against the side that they hate. And that is the real mistake the politicians are making, are kind of leaving that be and allowing it and not doing anything to police it, right? So we're in a situation now, timing-wise, I think it was a mistake through Minister Padarat to say that there will be no apology from the Prime Minister with regards to her comments. And he has tried to justify the situation, right, in two ways. Now, the Prime Minister apparently told MP Colmember, don't point your finger at me. And when he said, why not? She said, because I'll cuff you down. Now, when you look at the statement, granted, the MP for Digicel North, Colmember, is rather short. But the Prime Minister is not a large person herself. It's not a large woman. And both of them are up there in years. The thought of a serious physical confrontation between the two doesn't seem practical. I don't think anyone thinks the Prime Minister is actually physically going to cuff down Colmember. Right? It's not a real threat in that literal sense. However, the timing of it, in a period where you just had someone kind of, honestly, does anyone think that that lady honestly intended to say, oh, Venezuela, she's here, take her out now, take her out now? Do you honestly think that was a serious attempt on the Prime Minister's life? No, it wasn't. But what happened was, it might put the idea in someone's head. It might encourage people psychologically, right? It's the kind of things that should not be allowed to be out there. And what the Prime Minister said is not as serious. And Minister Padarat is saying, first of all, two things. One, they have endured years of unwarranted attacks from the PNM in Parliament. And two, she meant it politically. Now, I get it. It's not as serious as what the woman who essentially doxed, I think her residence is, basically, it's known to the public anyway, right? It's not as serious as that. But optically, when we're trying to say, hey, don't be doing things like telling people, look, the Prime Minister's residence is here, go take her out. Let's not do that, right? It doesn't look correct when you're now doing throwaway threats out there that you don't mean. Yeah, the lady didn't mean it either. And then trying to say, well, you know, we've endured years of use by the PNM. Now, I understand. I remember MP Stuart Young, then Minister of Energy's comments, right? I don't necessarily know if he'll ever truly, fully live that down. But apparently there was a hot mic incident recently in Parliament. I'm not going to say who. I'm not entirely sure. I hope it's a hoax, right? I hope it's a hoax. But based on one highly questionable social media page that I don't know if it's reputable or not, the comment actually wasn't even directed towards the PNM. It was directed by one member of the government to another member of the government. And to me, that just speaks to a lack of decorum in Parliament in general, and the fact that it's years of abuse. I just think you all have no decorum at all. That is both sides of the aisle, whether it is towards your political opponents or potentially in this case at each other. So then now, and this is the thing, what did I say? The language used politically, they say things like the most vile and wicked, and then when you combine that with, I go cuff you down or go deal with you, whatever, or I think in one case, I hope for your political funeral or something like that. But the political side of that statement, this is during the campaign, I won't necessarily bring up who I don't want to pile on. The political side of it was implied, it wasn't outright stated when it was like, let's bury them. These things like that, there are people who will take it literally. There are people who will listen to what the Prime Minister said and say, hey, yes, if I see Colin Britt in the street, I should cuff him down. Now the difference is the government has a set of security, the opposition is not. But we don't want that precedent to be set. We already have a crime problem as it is. And I think we need to understand, because I'll never condone anyone saying, hey, inflict violence against politicians. So the statements against the Prime Minister, no matter what the intention was, like I said, it can't be allowed. And it can't be allowed to happen again. But you undermined that whole scenario, that whole principle, by then having your own statement against a different politician, saying, let's use violence against him. Because what does it mean to cuff someone down politically, Minister Padarath? Do me a favor. Stop making these communication errors from the jump. And then maybe, we won't have to have these side quests, these side-tracking pieces of discourse that has nothing to do with policy on how to get us out of the economic situation that you have found the country in and that we're hoping you will fix, rather than wasting time on things like this. But it is what it is. I need to take a break now. When we come back, we'll welcome the media ambassador. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College.
Merry Christmas.
First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded big ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also nationwide at Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road, Shamir, Uncle Beto, Santa Cruz, Better Deal Supermarket, Cunupia, and Aranguez, Khan's Liquor, Diego Martin Main Road, Ramsing Sports, Chaguanas and Cuba, Bobby's Barbecue Wrap, Mirage Supermarket, Sangre Grande, West B Supermarket, Diego Martin and Tacarigua, Seals Bar, San Fernando, Payless Hardware, Diego Martin Main Road, Dodge Roti, Pitti Valley, Mirage Westside Arima, Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police, also at ICNTT.com. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1082. Queens Royal College, 3-car raffle.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Remember waking up early just to catch your favorite cartoons? WESN brings back those magical mornings with Retro Saturdays.
Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born!
Where the young at heart relive the fun. Join us every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, only on WESN, the content capital.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot have a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happening in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
And we're back, and joining me while we are in a period where Acting ASP Arun is not able to join us. We do have Inspector Kirk Callender joining us once again, one of the TTPS media ambassadors. Inspector Callender, thanks for coming back to Talking Point. Welcome back.
Thank you so very much, Sean, for having me, and a pleasant morning to you, and pleasant morning to all of you in Trinidad and Tobago. And wherever you are tuning in the world today, it is nice to be back here.
Yes, it's also nice to see that you're still better dressed than me, but I won't say anything more about it. I won't say anything more. I'm not upset. I'm not upset. Now, jokes aside, we're here on a serious topic.
Yes.
It's one of those topics that it's of a highly sensitive nature. And dare I say, part of the reason why is, I think, arguably we haven't really, I think as a society, treated with it fully. It's still an issue. And it's something that comes up, and I guess it comes up every year around this time, as well as maybe other times in the year, but this is part of the calendar, 16 days of activism, and it begins, I believe, I just want to get this straight, it starts with the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and ends on Human Rights Day, right? And just this morning, reading the papers, there was an incident of school violence against a Form 2 student being beaten in a class. There was an incident of an alleged kidnapping and rape of a schoolgirl, of a 17-year-old schoolgirl on Friday, right, allegedly from a PH taxi driver. And then there's a potential or suspected murder-suicide, which, unless I get specific information otherwise, the implication usually is the husband kills the wife, then kills himself in an act that I guess it's very difficult to explain even if you know what the motivations are. And these are very recent stories, which I guess they're timely, but it's not like I wanted to have examples to go along with the topic this morning. So on that level, it's very upsetting, but it points to the reason why this still matters now, despite all of the talk that we've had about ending violence against women.
Well, you're absolutely correct. The issue of violence is common, is the common thread throughout all the examples that you gave there. And it tells us as a society, violence is just about everywhere, right? And it is something that has to be treated at all levels because it's a deeply rooted cultural and societal issue that has to be dealt with from all fronts. Be it political, socio-economic, criminogenic, sociological, and it requires all hands on deck in order for us to get to the root cause of the matter. You understand? So it is not simply an issue for the police to treat with only. We can treat with it at our level to a certain extent, but we all as a society have to get involved, have to get on board. We can no longer sit on the fence and say, well, husband and wife business is not my business, but I don't get involved in husband and wife business. Them was arguing yesterday, and today breeze can pass between them, so I'm not getting involved in that. We can no longer say that because it affects it affects all of us, and because you are speaking about, oftentimes when we speak about domestic violence, we only look at the primary victims, but there are secondary and tertiary victims. And those secondary victims might be the children, the siblings, and the society at large, because those victims came from the society. They came from a village, they came from a community. They have co-workers. They would have played sports, been involved in some other extracurricular activities, be it music, dancing. All those persons are affected by this person being a victim of violence. But do we look at it like that as a society?
Because when my friend passed away, one of the things was, it was like, Was there anything I saw? Was there anything I could have said? And at least in his case, I didn't have to worry about violence, right? At least eventually we found that out. But when you have a community where, oh, but they seem so happy. Oh, but everything seemed okay. And I guess, I mean, part of it is the community sometimes doesn't get the chance to do anything about it.
Exactly. So because one person, that one person, might be connected to 15, 20, 30 persons, be it directly or indirectly. Mm-hmm. So those persons would be directly and in some instances indirectly affected by violence being perpetrated against that person and even the death of someone as a result of violence. So violence against women and girls remains one of the most prevalent and pervasive human rights violations in the world. 1 in 3 women have been victims of domestic violence. According to the United Nations statistics, 840 million women over the age of 15 years and older has been victim of domestic violence at least once in their life. And this is a statistics for the last 2 decades. It has not changed much at all. Right. As a matter of fact, according to the statistics, it said there is a global change of 0.2%.
Increase or decrease?
In terms of the society being highlighted and being aware of it and want to make some changes or take action.
But you know, it's interesting that essentially what you're saying is it hasn't really changed.
It doesn't change.
But in 2025, we're at a time where, at least in the developed world, marriages, and not just marriages, but even coupling, is seemingly like being reduced based on social factors, and the fact that this is still, it's not reducing in line with reduced amounts of couples, or reduced amounts of marriages, or what have you, or the change in patterns of relationships. It's seemingly not being affected at all.
Well, and you are correct. One of the other alarming statistics, apart from the fact that 1 in 3 women may be victims of domestic violence, only 1 in 5 reports it.
Right.
So there is also gross mass underreporting as it relates to violence against women and girls, which is, and that can be for a number of reasons, because domestic abuse, also called domestic violence or intimate partner violence, can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. So it's more about coercion and control. Domestic violence transcends all boundaries. It has no color, class, creed, or race. It does not matter what your socio-economic status is. So you could be rich, you can be poor, you could be from the proletariat, part of the bourgeoisie, as the 1%ers, as they might say, in Trinidad and Tobago, not pointing fingers at anybody. So you could be doctors, lawyers, pastors, imams, and pundits. Politicians have all been victims of domestic violence. So it has nothing to do with class.
Or perpetrators.
Correct. Are victims or perpetrators. And oftentimes, when we hear victims, we automatically assume it's a female.
Yeah.
The victim and the perpetrators can be both, well, they are both males and females. Of course, it is more prevalent as it relates to the victims being females, but victim has also been perpetrators as well. But because of the fact that the focus today is on the elimination of violence against women and girls, some persons may have a different definition of what violence is. So I just want to make some clarity here. According to the United Nations, it is any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. And the abuse can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions, or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behavior that frightens, intimidates, terrorizes, manipulates, hurts, humiliates, blames, injured, or wounds someone, right? So it is not just physical, right? I can tell you, if you, I can say, a man could say to a man, if you only leave me, I'll kill you. He never hit her in his life. But those words, that mere statement, anytime you leave me, I kill you. No other man can get you but me. And if you're leaving me, you're not taking my children.
And you see, this is the thing, because I think in other cases, like if it was two fellows on the streets or what we see in politics, well, who really means it? But at the same time, well, part of it is if we make that assumption in cases like this, first of all, this is a situation where really and truly, can you just be like, you know, why so serious? No, statements like that have to be taken seriously because you can't say oops when you see the consequence at the end.
Exactly, and more often than not, when they make those threats, they usually
when it's against a partner like that.
Correct. Well, I don't want to get too much into the politics, but it is quite interesting, the conversations you were having before I came on here had to do with somebody sending a picture of somebody's house and so on. So the theme for the 16 Days of Activism 2025 is unite to end digital violence against all women and girls, emphasizing the urgent need to address online abuse like harassment, disinformation, and image-based abuse. This theme is also reflected in the slogan #NoExcuse, #ActToEndViolence. And of course, there's the focus, the goals, and the calls to action. The focus is that the campaign highlights digital violence as a growing form of abuse that harms women's and girls' safety, well-being, and participation in public life. And the goal is it calls for collective action to create safer online spaces through stronger laws, better platform accountability, and increased support for survivors. The call to action is the theme encourages people to be allies by challenging harmful online narratives, speaking out against abuse, and promoting a digital world free from violence. So organizations are encouraged to engage in activities such as public awareness campaigns, policy roundtables, and media engagement to address the issues and advocate for change. So the timing of this 16 Days of Activism could not be more perfect. And it takes place annually from November the 25th, which is tomorrow, as you quite rightly would have mentioned. And the November the 25th is a day recognized internationally by the United Nations. It's an international day for the elimination of violence against women. And the 16 days and on December the 10th, which you would have indicated earlier, is International Human Rights Day. So during the day, 16 Days of Activism, people around the world unite to raise awareness about gender-based violence, challenge discriminatory attitudes, and calls for improved laws and services to end violence against women for good.
And the thing is, I guess this is always going to be part of the questioning, because we have a situation where there's a high degree of violence in our society. How much of that potentially encourages violence against women? Because it's one thing if it's a robbery, if it's a home invasion, stuff like that. But then now, if it's a robbery and rape, if it's domestic violence, or even to some extent, because when you look at the school violence, some of the more brutal looking videos are the violence just amongst the girls, right? And to what extent is whatever is pushing society to, and making it, how to say, in the perpetrator's minds acceptable,
right?
To be so callous, is that maybe filtering down now when people who want to inflict domestic violence basically see, hey, well, they're shooting at people, what are you saying me for? I am just disciplining, right? Or I am just dealing with, this is a domestic matter. Your police don't need to be involved there.
Well, I am so happy that you went there, because there was a study, an in-depth study done on domestic violence, intimate partner violence, domestic abuse on Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region.
Right, yes.
And coming out of that study, some of the findings indicated that it is a deeply rooted cultural, societal issue that is accepted to some extent, to a large extent, in the society. So in other words, a perpetrator who was a victim of domestic violence or who witnessed domestic violence would eventually become abusive and violent towards his partner. And also the victim who witnessed domestic violence as a child and was also a victim of domestic violence, they may very well find themselves in a relationship with an abusive partner. So the children who are perpetrating violence in these schools, they would have seen that at home, may have seen that at home, may have been a victim of domestic violence, or may have witnessed it. And they probably took that as the norm, the societal norm, to treat with issues when they are angry, or they are probably lashing out for attention.
I mean, not all of them, they might have witnessed violence within the community, but that borderline could be similar enough to domestic violence, could be violence against women, right? Or just general violence. But going back, first of all, and this points to when you say it's not just one victim, this is part of the consequence of the children being victims, of the family members being victims.
Right. So those are the secondary victims.
But also, I think this comes up every time, because it's usually at this point in the conversation where I'm reminded of the phrase that I will never fully understand and that I will never remember until we get to this point in the conversation. If you don't beat me, you don't love me. Correct. And it's a phrase that, and one of my friends basically said, well, maybe it's a good thing that you don't understand it, right? But it's just one of those things where I don't get how this is that culturally ingrained and therefore acceptable, right? And I mean, I guess it's still a thing, right? We've had this conversation before, but this is still a thing despite all of the attempts, and one could argue it's not the TTPS's lack of trying or the relevant ministries and state entities not trying. In this case, it is to get that cultural shift seems to be quite hard.
Exactly. It is very organizational culture and societal culture is very hard to break, and it is very hard to change, right? So I would have arrested and charged and taken before the court a number of perpetrators for committing several offenses under the Domestic Violence Act, breaching the order, threatening, intimidating, and so on. And on many occasions, the victim went to court and indicated that they don't want anything. Mm-hmm. They still love the guy, they forgive him, he apologized, and I am talking here. I am telling you, assault and violence of a brutal nature. Brutal, I tell you. Serious injuries. And at one time, I think I said this last year, actually, when I was on this program, actually. I would have arrested and taken before the court a man, and the woman, his lawyer got up and said, well, Your Worship, I do not understand why we are here, because my client informed me that the victim doesn't want to pursue the matter. And when the magistrate turned to the prosecutor to ask and so on, and well, as a matter of fact, he approached the victim directly. She said, yes, which she never told me that. And the magistrate lambasted me, embarrassed me, ridiculed me in front of the court. Yeah. Before the open court in front. And why police charge the man and thing? And I felt demotivated, humiliated, embarrassed. Because I would have done my job.
And much less now if it's random Joe public, where you intervene, right? You call the police. So for a family member, it could happen as well. You call the police come out, and the victim is like, I fell.
Correct.
And then you're like, what am I don't understand. And then this is the thing, at least in your case, you don't necessarily have a personal relationship with the victim. Now, if a family member trying to do the right thing, now the victim might take it out on you. How dare you try to protect me from my abusive husband, because that's not what I want.
Right.
So I could just imagine what you felt can be similar to what anybody in that situation of trying to help.
Well, I want to go a little further. Let us suppose, God forbid, the person carried out the threat and actually killed the person. The family members would be the first on national television, on every newspaper, every form of social media, lambasting the police for their family's death, because they would have made several reports and the police didn't do nothing.
Right.
My sister or daughter or mother made several reports and the police didn't do nothing. But I want to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago who is listening that despite how many reports have been made, the police can only go as far as the victim is willing to go. So you can make a report on behalf of anybody. Anybody can make a report on behalf of anybody. But if the victim is saying, I don't want anything, I just want the man to be one, without a victim, you don't have a case.
So question, because some people might think, oh, well, physical injury could be evidence. But usually in the case of assault, the victim will accuse the perpetrator. And in this case, we don't have that. So bruising and broken bones and lacerations.
She could say she got that by any means. She fell.
She fell in a rose bush. Yeah. She fell on a brick.
And they usually come up with a lot of excuses.
So what if the report includes video evidence?
The victim, we still need the victim.
You still need the victim.
We still need the laws in Trinidad and Tobago indicate, because remember, a man has a right to confront his accuser. Eh? You understand? And he who alleges has to prove. The perpetrator has nothing to prove. You know?
But can the law move independently if a family member says, look, I have it on tape. Look, watch him. He has a knife. She has a cutlass. He chopped off leg. You know, he beat her with a cricket bat.
Unfortunately, the laws in Trinidad and Tobago, we have not reached that level. So, for example, in the United States, you really don't need the victim to testify or to prefer charges. You understand? The police can go and arrest the person and so on, and prefer charges without the cooperation of the victim to some extent. But in Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, that is not the case. And I just want to make this clear. I am not blaming the victim for their deaths. I am also not, because I understand how the mind and the psyche of a victim of domestic violence work. I had to study it extensively for my bachelor. So I want to put that out there. I'm not blaming the victim, and I'm also not saying they look for what happened. I am simply saying it is not easy.
Is it similar to children who they are not necessarily physically abused by their parents, but mentally and emotionally abused? And even as adults, it's difficult to take themselves out of the, oh, I have to please my parent, or I have to listen to my parent. It's similar in the sense of, oh, I have to please my spouse. I did something wrong. I am the problem because they're mad at me and they have to have a reason to be mad at me.
In addition to that, the part of the psyche of the brain and psyche of a victim of domestic violence work. After I help you, the police, I cooperate with you to bring this man to justice, prefer charges and so on. When he is convicted and goes to prison, what is going to happen to me? Who is going to take care of me and my children? Where am I going to live? Because I am by his in-laws now. So are they going to forgive me for putting their son in jail if they put me out?
Ideally,
they would not. So if they put me out, where am I going to live?
But that can happen, yes.
My children. So they are in a survival mode, survival instincts, as it relates to sitting on the fence, cooperate, should I cooperate, should I not cooperate? And they say, you know what, it's better I just leave this thing alone.
Is that because of the culture? Because I could see where the parents are going to support the son or the daughter in rarer cases, but for this case, for argument's sake, we'll just go with the son. The parents will support the abuser because they themselves might culturally find it acceptable, and as you pointed out, it can be that he learned it from his family. He learned it from his parents' dynamic.
Correct.
Although I would argue that you have a chance in a modern society where the parents are going to say, no, that's not acceptable.
Correct.
And the son might be an outlier, not the norm in the family, right? In which case, it kind of depends on what family you marry into. I just find this is interesting because this touches on a lot of traditional cultural norms that you will find internationally that have different details, and various countries are at different levels of dealing with this, but it might be more common than we think. But here's a flip side now, because before, I think a lot of the times I would wonder, how does the violence affect the domestic violence? How does the state of violence encourage domestic violence? But let's take it in reverse. This is something that children might be exposed to, and then they act out in schools potentially about it, right? So then, to some extent, do we also have to consider the domestic violence is encouraging the violence. Because if you're going to be callous to your own intimate partner, your life partner, your ride or die, the mother of your children, the person you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with, who is the rest of society? If you're going to be violence against your own children, who is the rest of society?
Yeah, because the violence has to start somewhere. It would have started somewhere, and it would have been either accepted or encouraged somewhere. So much so, because the adult who is the perpetrator, they were once a child, you know. They do remain children. They grow up. So it is important to remind the society that you are not only raising a son or a daughter, you know. You are raising somebody's father and husband and somebody's wife and mother. So it is very important that you train up that child in the way that they may grow. So when they get old, they wouldn't depart from it. So from the TTPS's perspective, we would have realized that as society evolved, we also had to evolve as an organization.
Right.
So in 2020, the Commissioner launched a specialized unit to investigate intimate partner violence, namely the gender-based violence unit. And in 2021, this unit was amalgamated with the Child Protection Unit and the Sexual Offensive Unit, and it is now called the Special Victims Department, right? Where police officers were highly trained, and training was continuous, of course, continued to remain continuous. But these officers primarily focus on victim-centered and perpetrator. They have adopted a victim-centered approach, and they are perpetrator-focused. So whilst they are focusing on the victim, the intention also simultaneously is to focus on the perpetrator and ensure that perpetrator is brought to justice. Of course, the Special Victims Department does not have all the officers to treat with intimate partner violence or violence and youth throughout Trinidad and Tobago. So what the TTPS did is that through the police academy, in collaboration with the United Nations, there was something called the Spotlight Initiative. This Spotlight Initiative, they came up with a program where police officers were were trained in gender responsive policing. I was one of the trainers in that, so I would have trained a lot of police officers. So that first contact that the victim has with the police, they must not feel as though they are the perpetrator, or we don't want them to be the victim twice, right? So that gender responsive policing and that victim-centered approach is to treat the victim as a victim. And they must also feel, so before it is handed over to the Special Victims Department. Understand? Because the first point of contact may not be the special victims,
Right.
someone from the Special Victim Department.
It would be a responding officer who could be from anywhere.
Correct. It would be a responding officer, because you can report that in any station. Further to that, the then Commissioner of Police, Ms. Ulla Christopher, in collaboration with the then head of the Special Victims Department, Ms. Claire Gayal, and the senior SU, they came up with a manual, a TTPS guidance manual for police officers that gives a step-by-step guide as to how to treat with victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. Right? So that had been happening. Of course, Ms. Claire Gayal would have undergone training, went on several panel discussions to bring that level of awareness. Herself, along with several persons from the Special Victims Department, would have had several TV, radio, and media appearances educating the public on domestic violence and services offered by the TTPS. So, for example, some of the services we have offered is what you call the Victim and Witness Support Unit, right? Yes, yes.
The witness support is also, I think, a part of the key thing as well, right?
Yes, so that unit offers psychosocial support, as well as working in collaboration with other stakeholders like to provide safe houses. We even work with external stakeholders to get jobs for some of the victims so that they can be more self-sufficient, more independent to get out of that situation.
But also, we kind of take it for granted without realizing it's always self-evident to people on the outside looking in, oh, this is wrong. Like on the internet, on our site Reddit, there's a lot of people asking for advice where to most of the people responding, it seems obvious, but to the person in whatever difficult domestic situation, they can't see it.
They cannot see it.
Right?
Cannot see
and sometimes
many instances.
that could also not just be the victim, but also the people around the victim where, okay, what do I do? Do I blow up my friend's marriage? What about the kids? And they're thinking, because again, we know the potential consequence might be domestic violence, murder-suicide. But until the murder-suicide happens, we ain't reached there yet. So no one is thinking worst case scenario. And think, oh God, what if I break up the home and then what do the kids happen? How will they, where will they live? As opposed to, yeah, but violence though.
Yeah, true. Because some of the perpetrators would tell you, well, I still love my husband, you know, and the children still love their father. He's an excellent father to the children. All I want is just for the man to change. But we focus sometimes so much on the victim and not the perpetrator, you know, as it relates to us giving the perpetrator that necessary assistance and the same level of psychosocial support so that he can change and reintegrate back into society to become a better individual.
Because not just
well,
that.
He or she, but I'm going with he for now because we're focusing on violence against.
Because I guess part of the thing is there's deficiencies in the law.
Yes.
And it's not like it will be, oh, well, there's obvious fixes and, you know, just parliament. Like maybe in other cases there might be more obvious fixes. But this is a very complex situation because you can, the pendulum can swing too far in the wrong direction. And then, you know, there are cases abroad with too many false accusations or just how it's treated as opposed to trying to solve the problem, just make more problems. Right? Because it's a tricky situation. You are dealing with kids, potentially. You are dealing with a household. You are dealing with a family dynamic. And I guess you don't necessarily want to, you don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. Right. You know, granted, if it's violence, so sometimes the cure can't be worse than the disease, but other times it is possible, right? And then, of course, you also have situations where what can be a legitimate small domestic situation, you don't want to be a factor, an outsider, the police, to blow it up further, right? Maybe it wasn't violence yet. You know, maybe it was mental and emotional, and with some help, it can be prevented from reaching to physical violence, and the emotional stuff could be reduced.
Well, you are absolutely correct. Sometimes we might be hurting more than helping. That is just the statistics. That is what the research says. That is what the statistics says. Sometimes when, sadly, the police get involved or the matter reaches the court or the woman makes a decision to leave, things could get worse. It has proven. It is a proven fact statistically, right? So it is a very tricky, complex, diverse, complicated situation. It is not straightforward at all because of the amount of intricacies and
when you say it could get worse, to clarify, the perpetrator might become more extreme.
Exactly.
Yes. Like as a response to everything.
Yes, because in the United States, research has shown that, well, I cannot remember the percentage, that when they decide to leave the abusive relationship, that is where they are murdered, and not whilst they are with the perpetrator.
Yeah.
That is quite scary, actually, because you made a decision to leave.
Yeah.
And so hence the reason you as the police or you as a family member cannot force, or it is not recommended to force the victim to leave. They have to arrive at a place where they believe in their mind it is comfortable, it is safe for me, it is safe for my children, that when I walk away, I am able to start over safely and successfully without free from harm, as opposed to pushing them too soon and making the situation, when I know it's not what Trinidad and Tobago and the world wants to hear. That is what the research has shown.
But also they have to come to the point where, look, I need to leave.
Correct.
As opposed to you telling me I need to leave, but I don't want to leave, and then I decide, oh, I'll call my man and try and make up. But he vexed now because the community has, well, they heard everything that's going on, so everybody looking at him funny, and his own family looking at him funny, and his kids looking at him funny. Meanwhile, the victim is forced in a situation that she didn't 100% commit to, and she's the one that has to deal with the consequences more than anybody else. So, I mean, it's just one of those things, huh? It's similar to when you think, oh, we'll help these native people by bringing technology. Yeah, but they don't have immunity to smallpox. So, you know, it's like there are a lot of things, oh, I'll help this community by introducing this business.
Because
but then you think
the truth be told is that we believe this is what the victim wants to know. But did you communicate with them?
Right. We assume.
You assume. Did you have a conversation with them to ask them what it is you want? As opposed to giving me a house when I don't need one.
But here's the catch-22. But we've already also established previously that they don't always know what's best for themselves, right?
So you see how difficult it is, right?
Right.
And that is exactly why I said earlier, it is not a straightforward situation to deal with. It is complex, it is complicated, it's not something so okay, well, we believe this is the best system. Even though you might be right. You are absolutely correct. We move her from the situation, give her a fresh start, relocate the children to school, migrate, do what. But if the person doesn't arrive at that place in their mind.
I mean, in a way, what's crazy is because we consume a whole lot of American media. One of the most popular, long-standing TV shows in America is literally about an SVU unit. And a lot of what you said here, granted, it's not going to be the most accurate depiction of what police actually go through. But a lot of what you said here, they put that in the scripts. They get the narrative out there for people to kind of understand emotionally what can go on, how messy it could be, how dangerous it could be, how tricky it could be. And yet, that show is very old. The activism by the TTPS has been going on for quite a few years now. And it seems as though we haven't necessarily reached everybody yet. It hasn't taken root yet, and I think this is why people might think, oh God, this again, why you bring up this again? Listen, we can't even get people to not trust anything they see, any and everything they see in Facebook Marketplace. This is a little bit more, should I say, severe, the consequences of what we're talking about. This is not just money, this is now potential lives.
Correct. You are absolutely correct, and the question is, where do we go from here? How do we treat it as a society? And for it, we have to start with retraining our boys and girls, because they eventually will grow up to become young men and young women.
Is that the mistake a lot of people make? It's like, oh, we have to teach boys not to be violent.
But the girls too, because the choices they make could affect them.
Well, not to be violent, they don't make. But also not to accept violence.
No, correct. So, we, from the TTPS's perspective, we have police youth clubs, as you are quite aware, that focuses primarily on young men and women between the age of 5 to 29, right? And there are a lot of work, there's a lot of work that we have been doing through those police youth clubs for a number of years now. We have youth clubs in all 10 policing divisions, over 100 registered police youth clubs. And we have worked closely with a number of NGOs as it relates to empowering the women, changing their culture, their mindset, as well as the boys. And one of the NGOs that we have worked with closely over the years is the National Network for Rural, the Network for Women Rural Producers in Trinidad and Tobago. That is run by, the president, of course, is a young, effervescent woman. She's in her 70s, almost 80, Miss Gia Gaspar Taylor. She has worked closely with the community-oriented policing section and many of the police youth clubs as it relates to pushing this, the mandate as sensitizing members of the public as it relates to the elimination of violence against women and girls. And we had she working with youth club like the Whiteland Park Police Youth Club. We had her working with the St. Joseph, Maracas St. Joseph, a number of the youth clubs to push this narrative, to sensitize persons and so on. And I want to say, I want to make mention of someone here today who would have worked closely with her. And that person was nominated for an award. The award speaks primarily to, the award says, we the governing body of Every Girl Wins Institute hereby recognize you as a pioneer trailblazer in civility, advocating for kindness and respect for women and girls worldwide. The Every Girl Wins Institute is one of the largest institutes in the world that recognizes persons who work closely as it relates to the elimination of violence against women and girls. And this person is a male who happens to be the only male in the entire universe to have received this award.
Oh, okay.
In the entire universe. And he's from right here in Trinidad and Tobago. He's none other than Senior Superintendent Mr. Subhash Ramkilawan. His youth club is the Whiteland Park Police Youth Club. He would have worked closely with the National Network for Women Producers in Trinidad and Tobago, along with a lot of indigenous groups and several other police youth clubs for over 30 years as it relates to pushing this agenda when it comes to the elimination of violence against women and girls. And some of the youth clubs, I would have mentioned them already. We had Miss Rianne Moore from the Charlottesville Police Youth Club, who would have gotten awards locally, regionally, and internationally, pushing this, one of the many initiatives in her youth club. We also had Mr. Larry Braffett from the Mount St. George Police Youth Club, Mr. Collis Hazel, Roxborough Police Youth Club, Mr. Greenidge from the Oropoon Police Youth Club. We had Miss Sasha Williams Goddard, St. Joseph Police Youth Club, working again closely with Miss Gia Gaspar Taylor. We had the Bagatelle Blue Basin Police Youth Club, Miss Marsha Malchan, and so many of these youth clubs, day in, day out for the last 15, 20, 30 years, Mr. Shabadi from St. James Police Youth Club, working closely with young people between the age of 5 to 29, trying to change this narrative, trying to change the culture and the mindset of the young men and the young women. We had PC Prasad in the Sangre Grande Police Youth Club with the suspension program, redirecting young persons as it relates to, you know, the whole culture and mentality with violence, how they see themselves, you know, that whole positive youth development, how they see themselves, how they view themselves, respect for themselves, respect for each other. And I can go on and on in relation to the youth club. So I just want to say to you, and Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, through the community-oriented policing section, and all the youth clubs which falls under the umbrella of the community-oriented policing section. This is what we have been doing for years, because the first youth club was established in 1974, right? I think the two is Kukurita and John, right? And from that time till now, we have over 100 police youth clubs. So if you were to ask me, what is the TTPS doing to change the culture and the mindset of young men and women as it relates to violence? My answer is going to be, we have been doing that through the police youth clubs that runs on 7 core strategic pillars. And we have also been doing that through the community-oriented policing sections, going into schools, churches, and so on, lecturing to them as it relates to bullying and other forms of violence. And of course, I would have mentioned earlier the Special Victims Department. They also have their mandate as it relates to sensitizing the public when it comes to the elimination of violence against women and girls.
Well, first off, just to say, and the activism is important, not just because now you have situations where the laws might not cover everything, the laws might not be up to date, you have the social media stuff that who knows if, I don't even know if we have laws to cover social media stuff, right? But also then you have the issue, not just with the difficulties in prosecuting, but also the perennial issues with reporting or lack of reporting, right? Yes. And that's why the activism is so important, perhaps even more than other forms of violent crime. All of those things put together, you might have them in other situations, but they're so combined and concentrated and multiply each other that, well, with the activism now, we could try to nip it in the bud, because it's really hard to deal with a crime that happens behind closed doors in the privacy of one's own home. But With that said, though, because a lot of people say, well, why we are to do the job of the police, why we are to do the job of the police? But part of a society's social contract is, because the society is not going to be 50% of the population, it's not going to be police to watch over the other 50%. So on some part, we need to look out for each other, because we can't have a police officer in every home.
No, we can't.
Right? We can't have a police officer on every street. So the community, as much as the police are being activists on this, right? Even at your best, again, half of the population isn't police, so it's not like, you know, you could tell the entire population and know for sure it's going to stick. Exactly. Right? There's only so many police, therefore there's only so much messaging, no matter how widespread it is. Not to call anyone out, but have communities stepped up, not necessarily NGOs, but NGOs could be part of this, yes, but communities to say, listen, as a community, we also need to do our part. We used to have the village, right? Yes. And maybe the village failed on this in the past, even when we had it, yes, right? Because hush, hush, don't want to talk about things. And people might think, oh, what about the 1%? Well, the last thing is the same mindset, right? For the wealthy. We don't want to make ourselves look bad. We don't want to upset the money. We don't want to lose our place in society. So hush, hush now, right? Well, but we need communities potentially to reverse that thinking, because I mean, part of it is to educate, but also part of it is the response as well. And
the enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, we still have a long way to go as a society where that is concerned, because it is still a kind of close-knit. Some victims don't want you to know, well, they are a victim. And even though you may suspect, they don't want to expose the perpetrator for so many different
We understand when men are victims, why they don't want to say it. Yes. But for women, that also happens?
Yes, it does. It does, because again, their socio-economic status, they don't want the embarrassment.
Right.
You may not, well, not do, may not want the embarrassment.
Especially if it's a higher class, then they worry about it. But even not so wealthy might not want the embarrassment, right?
You are correct. Some people are very private, because there may be the mindset, well, he may either change, or one day I may get out. So I'm just buying time. I don't want to make the situation any worse. My hand is in the lion's mouth.
I guess, yeah.
And in the meantime, I just have to pat the lion on the head, you know, don't upset the lion at all, and everything should be fine, right? But sadly, many of the victims who were killed and murdered thought that way. They were not able to get out, right? So
is it also true that the violence is not always rational?
No, it's not.
They could lose money gambling. They could be upset about something else. They could be drunk, and it doesn't have to be a reason to say that because it's rational, I know how to placate and prevent.
You could do everything correct under the sun, with the moon and the stars, and they would still find a way, may still find a way to be violent and abusive too. So you can't do nothing right. You understand?
Yeah.
So it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It is not you that it may not necessarily be you that caused the perpetrator to be violent. And now again, this is not me. The research has said provocation is one of the risk factors when it comes to domestic violence. Not I said that. So in local parlance, where they say a woman's strength is she mouth. You would have heard that before.
Yeah, something to that effect, yeah.
So a woman's strength being a mouth, that may provoke. I'm not saying it's a reason and an excuse. I'm only saying what the research said. And I have the statistics here to prove that. Not I saying that, right? Provocation is one of the risk factors, right? So there are many risk factors, and that leads to domestic violence. But let me show you. Let me indicate.
Just to clarify, provocation doesn't justify the violence.
No, it doesn't. It's just one of the risk factors.
And it's not that you're saying don't provoke the guy because it'll make you wrong. You're saying don't provoke the guy because even though he is wrong, you're still the victim of violence that you didn't have to be the victim of potentially.
No. Either way, and you are so correct. Either way, once it leads to violence, there is no justification.
Yeah.
So and I'm glad they put some context to that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want anybody to walk away with the impression that I said you look for what you get because you provoke the man or the woman. That is not what we're saying, Trinidad and Tobago. We are simply saying the research said that, right? And that is one of the risk factors, right? So that we want persons to walk away with the proper context. But you know, one of the things that we don't look at as a society, the impact of domestic violence on the society. So in 2005, the burden of sexual abuse and domestic violence was estimated to be $487.7 million TT. Because the psychosocial support has a cost now.
Right.
There's a cost, right? So that is the economic factor.
Does that, when you say, so that is the direct cost of the support mechanisms and all of these services? Because
well, not just the, and when we say psychosocial support, I mean, you have to seek medical attention.
Right.
You have to undergo surgery and corrective surgery. All those things have the mother and father getting killed. The child now becomes a warden to the state. But there is a cost to raising these children till they reach 18 and so on. That is a cost to the society. And they're speaking about grants and all kind of things. Because these children have to eat, they have to go to school, they have to be fed, clothed and so on. That is a cost, you know?
I know, but that is literally just the direct cost.
Correct.
For a narrow set of costs, because I would imagine also there's the indirect costs. Now there's the emotional turmoil and the loss of productivity, right?
Exactly.
And then the consequences now of that emotional turmoil to then, you could say one domestic violence situation could then lead to future domestic violence situations that multiply this price tag, right? Especially if, look, some abusers, some people, let me just put it this way, some people, they learn what not to do.
Right.
And as you point out rightfully so, other people learn this is the thing to do,
right?
Unfortunately.
Correct. And the major cost were to the survivor, which is 244.3 million, or 50% of the total cost. That is your...
The survivor is paying that?
No.
What needs to just go to the survivor, right?
And the state is 80.6 million, or 17% of the total cost. And of course, society on a whole, 71.8, because some family member may have to absorb that some of the cost now.
Right.
To send the child to school and take care of them and all that kind of stuff. Right? And as you quite rightly mentioned, the physical, emotional, and psychological impact of domestic violence is not caused only by physical injury. It could undermine the social, economic, psychological, spiritual, and emotional well-being of the victim. The perpetrator, because we ain't talk perpetrator yet, and the society as a whole. So it's a major contributor to the ill health of women. It has serious consequences of women's mental and physical health, including in their reproductive and sexual health. Because if they are badly beaten and so on, they may never be able to make a child again.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
These include injuries, gynecological problems, temporary or permanent disabilities, depression and suicide, amongst others. So as victims adapt to abusive behavior, the verbal or psychological tactic can gain a strong foothold in victims' minds, making it difficult for them to recognize the severity of the abuse over time.
Well,
and of course, we ain't even going to the Stockholm syndrome, where the victim does identify with the perpetrator. There is a conversation.
But then also, when you're going through all of this, do you have time and the mental capacity to exercise and eat right and do all of those other things?
Exactly.
And like, yes, I know back in the day, people did whatever, and a lot, the life expectancy grew for a reason.
Correct.
And now, potentially, if you're suffering through all of this, all of those benefits that cause life expectancy to go into the late 70s to 80s now, in some cases, well, that's kaput, right? Because of the high stress and just what the toll it could take on you. And then, even if the kids, like you say, even if the kids are not, even if the kids don't witness the violence, they're not victims of the violence and they don't witness the violence, but a parent is a victim of violence. Can we say that they are being raised in a healthy way?
Well, no, you can't. No, they are a victim, and they are still a victim.
Yeah. But the point is, they see nothing, they hear nothing, right? They experience nothing. But the point is, the parents now are still, this situation where the parents still exists, and these are the people who somehow have to find it within themselves to parent two or more, or one or more young human who is impressionable, who might not...
Well, interestingly enough, children feed off of their parents' energy. And you might tell yourself they don't know, and they are not affected by it because you believe you are doing such a great job hiding it from the children. Well, I have news for you. You may not be doing such a good job as you think you are, and the children may be, because they may know and might not tell you because they might not want to make the situation worse. So they are affected directly by it, emotionally and psychologically. And that has an effect on them. You understand? So, well, I don't know how much time I have, but...
Well, one last thing I want to get out, because then there's always the case where if you are indecisive in a situation, there's always a chance that, say, one of your family members might decide, oh, I'm going to be decisive. He hit you, I'm going to deal with him.
Correct.
And the problem is that could escalate. Not saying that, it was a situation where the domestic violence perpetrator is an innocent victim. But at the end of the day, taking the law into your own hands, especially in a premeditated murder, is not something that we can condone, right?
Yeah, that's what you call vigilante justice.
Right.
And we would not want to encourage that.
Because that could happen when you successfully keep it a secret. When it comes out, now all of a sudden your younger brother or your bigger brother or your father might say, nah. And
then even it's so. Because they know you're not going to court. They know you don't want to get the husband or your boyfriend or your significant other, so on, lock up, but you touch my daughter, you touch my sister, I'm dealing with you. We're not encouraging that, but it happens. It happens. So I want to let Trinidad and Tobago know that this is not just an issue for women to fix. As men, we also have a role and function and a responsibility to assist, right? So you could speak up and you can speak out. Violence against women is pervasive, but it is not inevitable unless we stay silent, right? Know the issue and the sign, right? So you have to know your signs of when somebody's being abused. Gender-based violence isn't just a women's problem, men. And the 16 days campaign to combat gender-based violence is far from a women-only effort, right? Because, of course, without the efforts of men and boys too, we'll never put a stop to gender-based violence. Right, so take responsibility for how much power you have, because we have power, how we speak, how we respond, how much space you take up and your action and behavior. Question your complicity within systems of violence. Do you contribute to or oppose violence with your actions, words, or silence? Educate yourself and listen to people in your life who have different experiences of violence. Read anti-violence blogs, books, and other resources. Attend workshops or events that relate to anti-violence workshops. So it is important to engage the men and boys. I know the last government, I'm not going into the politics here, had something called, is it Empower? Empower. That was under Ms. Shamfa Kujo, because I was attached to community-oriented policing at the time, where, you know, the program was centered primarily around using men of influence in their society, some of the celebrities, persons who are well respected in their community and so on, to go on the block. And I mean, the men not coming in the classroom or in most men are coming in. Go meet the men where they are. Right? And have that interaction, that engagement with them. Let us speak one-on-one. Men talk is a kind of mentorship program kind of thing. And it was quite successful, actually. And you had a number of business people, corporate Trinidad and Tobago lined up actually hiring the young men who were unemployed coming out of that program. And I'm talking about sustainable employment. So again, I'm not pushing the politics, I'm only stating the facts, right? So so engage the men and boys so as to transform deeply ingrained gender norms, the same thing that we're talking about, to sensitize men and boys to look at the social construction of masculinity, the beliefs, the attitudes, and messages that are being reinforced in their communities, and to challenge harmful definition of manhood. You understand? We must recruit and train individual men to change their beliefs and behavior so we can instill those same changes in the wider society, right? Because men are called to lead. So men who have been transformed can influence their peers to change their behavior as well as, and not just refrain from violence themselves, but also to become advocates against gender-based violence in their homes and communities. It is critical to reach younger boys before gender-based violence becomes an accepted part of their lives, so that they can recognize, learn, and prevent violent behavior against women and girls.
And I just want to clarify, because it's healthy masculinity.
Yes.
And when you say men are called to lead, I'm sure there's some women who are like, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means when there's a noise in the middle of the night, you're going to tell the man to go and lead, right? If you are stuck on some rural road and the car breaks down, most of the time, now in that situation, there will be some women who are like, no, I'll deal with it. But there's a lot of things where, look, at some point, the bag of provisions is too heavy. At some point, like, and there's certain things where the woman probably should lead to, right? But there's certain situations, particularly in confrontational situations where, you know, you're going to want the man of the house to lead, to deal with it, because he is equipped to deal with it.
Right.
So that's all. It's not about, oh, men are called to lead, they're in charge, and they have to subjugate the women. No, that's when we start to get to the actual problem. So it's to get young boys to understand on a healthy level, yes, there will be points and times when, you know, if you want to be married, if you want to have a girlfriend, you're going to have to be responsible for certain critical things. That's your role.
Exactly. So lots of work is required to socialize boys so that they can navigate important life topics in addition to gender-based, including sexual health, drugs, education, and how to end long-time cycles of violence. So these trainings offer men and boys a different model of masculinity.
Oh, because we're out of time, but I want to say, as you mentioned, drugs. It can start off where the guy is a good guy.
Correct.
And then he falls into gambling or drugs or something, and then the stress of it and the changes in him because of the extreme addiction or whatever could then lead him to become more abusive. Is that possible?
Well, and you are correct. And as a man, you as a woman wouldn't know what it is to be a man and vice versa. So the pressure of leading, father, parent, job, I mean, you have been pulled in all kind of different directions. And if you do not have a proper blueprint as a man as to how to be a man, a father, and a husband, you are going to be easily swayed and strayed by your emotions, and you might not know how to process and treat with pressure, per se, when it comes, and you may resort to violence.
Could there be negative peer pressure?
Of course.
Some men just, okay, we have St. James. I do have one quick point to make after, but this will have to be the only call that we take. I know we didn't open the phone lines earlier, I apologize, but we had a lot to talk about. St. James, good morning, you're on here.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Sean, I didn't get the name of the officer there, but I like how he's communicating in a real Trini lingo style with his facial expression. One has to understand and learn what the problem is. Good luck to the officer, but I didn't get his name.
Inspector Calendar, sir. Kurt Calendar, like the almanac. The spelling is different, but two L's and the E are the same pronunciation.
All right. He's good.
Yes.
Nicely. All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. So I just want to end by saying we speak so much about the changes that men have to make, but the women also are required to make changes as well. So I don't want to leave the program being accused of being biased. So I want to say to the women, empowering women and girls socially, economically, and psychologically to live lives free of violence is critical to ending gender-based violence. But while the advocacy and action of women is paramount in changing societal attitudes and securing true gender equality, men and women and boys have a critical, men and boys also have a critical role to play. Violence against women touches us all, regardless of their gender. So we must work together to ensure all people can live safe, empowered, and resilient lives. And I want to say one more thing. A man, to the women, this is to the women now. The women's group although beat me up for this. A man settles where he is respected, and he settles where he finds peace.
Yeah.
You understand? I want to say that one more time. A man settles, you will get the best out of any man once you provide an environment of peace and an environment of respect. Right? I never said that if you disrespect him and you make his home, well, not peaceful, that he should resort to violence. I didn't say that.
Right.
I am simply saying you get the best out of the man when you treat him with respect and he settles where you find peace.
So violence is the extreme, but normal men have a similar wavelength. That's not just a way to prevent domestic violence, because I remember seeing a podcast where a young lady said, I am a challenge, and she was proud to be with. I'm a challenge to be with. I'm a challenge for any man to be with. And she said that like that was a good thing. And in some ways, it's good to be interesting, and you don't want to be a simple person. You know, you want to try to maybe have some complexity to you, some depth to you, etc., etc. You don't want to be a shallow person. But I think the key point is that is not the same thing as being a challenge, because then that is like, I'm a burden for a man to be with. And the guy who responded to basically said, why will I want a challenge? Especially when, because there are still some women who want the man to be the earner, so he has to go into the workplace and deal with all of those challenges there. And then when he comes home now, does he want to deal with another challenge, right? So that's the thing. Not that, you know, relationships are supposed to be easy. It's not that the woman has to make the relationship easy for him and compromise until she herself now is reduced to nothing. But to be a why would a woman want a challenge of a man?
Correct.
It works both ways.
Yeah, and I think what you are alluding to there is communication. Eh?
Yeah.
Communication is key. Right. Well, I remember.
Well, also some partners, whether man or woman, can be overly demanding and entitled.
Correct.
And I think it goes to it's like, why? No, it has to be a partnership.
It has to be a partnership, and again, that is where communication comes in.
Well, yes.
Because when I was doing my marriage counseling, the pastor indicated to my wife, and well, my wife to be, and she's my wife now, there are three things that make a marriage successful: communication, sex, and money. And he said sex is not the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Communication is. Because you could have money and the sex, but no communication, you have a problem. You could have you could have two out of the three, and you still have a problem. But if you have communication, the other two, you might be able to get a work around it now.
Yeah.
You understand? So that communication is, do not assume, communicate.
Now, there's one more thing I want to bring up, and I only thought about it within the last 10 minutes or so. So the timing is off because we're kind of going backwards as opposed to ending the conversation. One of the things I see is, at times, women, when the situation hasn't gotten to the extreme yet, they might be able to extricate themselves when they start to realize, wait now, I'm being isolated from my family and my friends.
Right.
I'm being cut off.
Right.
So this is one of those warning signs. Not that it's always done because the man has some conspiracy to do this to the woman. Sometimes a couple, they're just busy. But for the friends and family and for the potential victim as well to be aware of, if all of a sudden now you're being encouraged not to communicate with your family, not to communicate with your friends.
Red flags. So you call those things red flags. And it's not carnival, eh? You don't only see flags around carnival time. So as the old people say, the things that you could see in the day now, don't wait until the night come to take flashlight to look for it. You understand? There's a chat. Some of the signs you see before marriage is not going to change after the marriage.
Right.
Right. So when you see that red flag, those red flags run. When anytime this becomes more possessive, checking your phone, don't want you to communicate with your family, jealous when you have any male person around, even your male family, red flag, red flags, red flags, red flags.
Because it doesn't seem abusive yet.
It doesn't seem,
but it could go down that way very easily.
It could come across as like, well, I mean, baby, you know I care about you, girl, and I just want to check up on you. Remember, your family don't really like me, you know.
I mean, most people have an issue when their significant other has friends of the opposite gender. Correct. Right? So it could start off there, but if it's your brother, that's a little too. All right, we're over time, so we'll have to end that there. I just needed to bring that point up so that people could be aware. Again, sometimes a couple is just busy, right? The question is, okay, you're busy. Will you be available if I request time of you, or will there just be more strange excuses? Right? So, Inspector Canada, thanks for joining us to speak about this heavy topic.
I just want to end by saying, let us come together as a society,
yeah,
men and women, and the society at large, to eliminate violence against women and girls.
I'll say this. We had a situation where we had some high-profile murders of young women. Society rose up, and then they settled back down. And I'm not too sure if it's a good thing that they haven't risen up again. This is not about the blame. This is about engaging. I haven't seen it. Because the police are there to engage, at least some officers. The Special Victims Unit is one of the more successful, if not the most successful police department that I've seen within the last 5 years. So there is an attempt by the service to do something about it. What about now the communities?
The society at large.
Because somebody has to report the crime for the police to do something, particularly about this crime. We're going to have random news reports about domestic violence just popping up in the papers for the police to see and then act out on. So it's just one of those things. It's a tricky situation.
Yes.
A former prime minister put it in a very not so diplomatic way, but there was some truth to what he said. So never forget that.
Yeah, so let us have a proactive approach and not a reactive approach.
Yeah, because reactive in this case could be very bad. Folks, that being said, stay safe. Be your brothers and sisters keepers, so remember your allegiance to each other, but also to the Republic as a whole. It's nice to be nice. Thanks to St. James for calling in. And yes, Inspector Calendar is that good. Hopefully we could see bigger things from him, yes? Put that out there into existence. We'll see each other tomorrow. Don't forget to be nice. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for being with us, as usual, here on WESN. My guest on this edition of the program is Leela Ramleen. She's somebody who was involved big time in an organization called the Greater Caribbean for Life. It was an anti-death penalty organization. She's resigned from that, but she's held on to a position as chair of the Catholic Commission for Social Justice in Trinidad and Tobago. What is social justice? And looking it up, here's some of what it says. Social justice is a virtue which guides us in creating those organized human interactions, such as fair and compensated distribution of the fruits of economic growth. It encompasses economic justice, a fair share of the pie, and social workers aim to open the doors of access and opportunity for everyone, particularly those in greatest need. There are other things it says, but let's bring Ms. Ramleen into the discussion. Now, good to have you, and thanks for agreeing to have this discussion.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning, viewers. Yeah, it's an important issue to address at this time.
So give us a sense of what is the sort of aim and objective and the mission of the Catholic
Commission for Social Justice. Yeah. First of all, can I just say that I'm no longer the chair, I'm a consultant.
Okay, with the CCSJ.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
Yes, a consultant. So CCSJ was formed in 2003. I came back after 30 years or more in England and straight into a synod that the church was having here with the then Archbishop Edward Gilbert. And the people, the faithful, said they wanted a social justice commission. And so CCSJ was formed. I was appointed as the chair. And it's one of many departments in our archdiocese. We have family life, youth, commission, liturgy, etc. And the aim, so we spent a long time, about 28 of us, including lawyers, doctors, etc., formed the committee to work with me. And our vision that we worked out is that we envision a transformed national and world community where justice, peace, and love prevail as divinely ordained by God, and which ensures human rights, duties, and human dignity.